Now that we've got our pumpkin drawn, I'm going to teach you how we can color it and shade it to make it actually look like it's three-dimensional. So, as you see in the example here, we're using several colors. Now we know that a pumpkin is orange, but what happens when the light hits it and shadow hits it, the oranges kind of change a little bit. So we're going to use several different colors. Of course, we're going to use white, and white is going to be the area where the light is actually hitting on our pumpkin. If you notice on this example here, the light is hitting in the center, kind of up high because the light's coming from higher up. And it's in the center where the highest point of each section is. And then around it we have a lighter color, yellow, around it. And then we're going to keep going until we get to a darker red. So we have white to yellow orange to orange to a red orange. And the red orange is kind of going to be where the shadows are, where it's kind of light's not hitting it as much. All right, so the first thing we want to talk about is these are crayons. So crayons are made with wax, so they can be very shiny and thick and don't blend very well. But as you learned in your practice when you were practicing shading your shapes with pencil, the same concept for crayons pertains to the same thing. So if we're using crayon and we want to blend the colors in crayon, if I were to take this yellow and do it really, really dark and put too much pressure on it, and then come back and try to blend in the orange, it doesn't really blend as well, and you'll notice you'll see a sharp line. But we want this line to fade a little bit more than that. So when you're using crayon, same thing as pencil, you don't want to put a lot of pressure on it. You want to very lightly just fill in, and you're kind of just gradually rubbing back and forth to kind of fill in some areas. And you can kind of go in a round motion and lighter as you come up. You can also take, you'll notice when I bring in the orange now, I can kind of overlap some of that soft yellow and kind of make it blend a little bit where it's fading, because we don't want a real sharp line. We want, when the light hits it, it's kind of like a soft, you want it to be really, really soft and not a harsh line. So we're going to start the lightest point, and what I would suggest is this. You're going to take your white, and you're going to be higher up in each section, but in the middle of each section. So I'm going to take my white. Now I don't want to do it very dark. I'm just very lightly coming around. And I'm kind of keeping that same shape. See, this section is a shape like this. So I'm kind of going in that same shape. Now when I move over here, I'm going to be going the same shape as this section. So I'm kind of right in the same line, kind of curving around. So I want to keep that roundness of it. So I don't want to go in a straight line across. That would kind of give it a flat two-dimensional effect. So you want to kind of go in that round area. So I'm coming around up here a little bit. And we can always, the lighter pressure that you put, you can always come back and add more. If you go too dark right at the beginning, you can't come back and fix it as well. So once I do my white, I'm going to bring my next lightest color, which is yellow, and I'm going to come around that all the way around it. I'm not going to just do the top, and I'm not just going to do the bottom. I'm coming all the way around it, and I can actually overlap that white a little bit because we want it to look like it's fading into it. So I'm coming around with the yellow here, and then I'll come over to this section and continue around. And yellow's lighter, so I could bring it down a little bit farther as long as I'm not pressing too hard, because I can come over it with orange and the darker colors. As long as I'm very lightly pressing, not real harsh. You don't want it to get that shiny, thick feel just like this. You want it to be soft. And then once I do all my sections with this yellow, I come in with my regular orange. And then I come around the same exact way. And we're still keeping that rounded motion. And you want that rounded feel because each section is kind of rounded. And we don't want it to look straight line. And I'm bringing it all the way down because we can always put the darker color on top. And notice how I'm overlapping a little bit. And notice I'm not just sticking to one spot. I'm kind of working around and working around, gradually kind of filling in that rounded motion. So the same thing in each section. You're going to do the same, coming around gradually. And once we fill in most of our colors, we can, if we feel like there's a spot that's not dark enough, you can always come back. But it's better to start soft first and then work your way a little bit darker. So notice I'm coming in each section. Notice I'm holding my crayon not straight up and down like a point, like a pencil. I'm kind of doing that shaded on the side of the crayon. It kind of gives you a better shading motion. And then finish each section. Kind of gradually working around and keep those lines. Notice I want to color in that, see if this line in this section is curved. I'm shading in that same curved motion. I'm not going straight across this way. The sections are vertical and kind of curved, so I'm keeping my strokes of my crayon going in that same direction. Now, once I get that, I can go into my darker color, and this is my red-orange. And I know that on the bottom, the light is not going to hit on the bottom of the pumpkin. It's going to be kind of like a shadow. So I'm going to come in with this darker color still very lightly. You can always come back and keep rubbing gradually, and it looks darker as you rub it, and keep rubbing those motions. And a little bit up at the top because it kind of curves into that stem, so there's going to be a shadow in there also. So I'm coming around the same way as I did all the other colors, and I'm kind of working gradually. And very soft pressure. You really just, that's the biggest key, is to just keep it very light and not pushing too hard. And then once you get all of these with the red-orange, that's going to be the darkest of the oranges. However, we also want to kind of create a little bit of a shadow. So, and the reason we did the blue, and you guys will learn this a little bit later, but the blue is the complementary color to orange. And a lot of times when the complementary color is going to help with the shadow. So right at the bottom, we know it's going to be really dark where there's not any light. So we can take our blue that we drew our pumpkin with, we can come up under a little bit and just kind of very gradually add a little bit of a shadow. Very light. If you go too dark with this, it's not reversible. So you want to just be very, very light with it. And you could add a little bit to the top. I'd be very careful at the top. You don't want to add too much. And some on the side. Until you have now, when you look at your pumpkin, it looks pretty much three-dimensional, okay? Where it looks like these sections are actually rounded. Now at the bottom, we want it to look like our pumpkin is actually sitting on the ground. So we know right under our pumpkin, the light's shining from up above. So right down here, it's going to be really dark. We're going to use that same blue, and we're going to come right under our pumpkin and just fill in this area right here. And we're just going to lightly, you can, right where it touches the pumpkin, you can press a little bit darker, but as you move out from the pumpkin, you want to lift up that pressure and do it very softly where the shadow is fading out just slightly. So notice how I'm just getting really light on the very ends. Now, after you've completed this part, then you can continue with your stem. If your stem is going to be brown, sometimes stems are green, so it depends on what color you choose. But same concept, if I'm going to press darker here at the bottom where it's shadow, and maybe up here, I just do a lighter pressure and not so hard so it looks like the light's actually hitting the top of the stem. And then later, if you'd like to add some vines, you can add some vines, some curly vines that come out, and maybe a leaf if you'd like a leaf. And then you can also color your background. Maybe you want your pumpkin sitting in the middle, you know, in the middle of the field in nighttime. So maybe you decide to do maybe some starlight. But you could decorate it any way you want to. And if I do this, and now this is a good example of how if I press hard with the white crayon, and I actually take dark black and just very lightly go over, it still leaves, you can still see the starlight because it doesn't really cover the white too much. And just light pressure, and it looks like the pumpkin's actually sitting in a field in the nighttime. And then you can color the ground whatever color you would like to. And just very soft pressure so you can see the starlight. And then if you wanted the ground to be green or brown or whichever you'd like, or even abstract a bright color is fine too. And we have our pumpkin that looks three-dimensional on our two-dimensional paper.